My name is Bienz. So as a day job, I work at Microsoft and I work in mixed reality, work on a device called HoloLens 2, and I really just help partners build apps and solutions for that device. So it's a very technical role, but really fulfilling to see people create new things in the space.
Tell us a little bit about how you got involved with programming, just XR space in general. Like, what was your path?
I mean, I've been doing programming for as long as I can remember. I think I wrote my first program around the age of 7. And so I've always enjoyed it. I've always had a knack for it, but also been interested in video games and VR. And so just all of that coming together. I love the programming side of it, but I also love the creative side of it, from the 3D modeling, thinking in 3D. Thinking in 3D has always been kind of natural for me. And so, all that really came together with virtual reality and all of the other things that are in XR. I think a lot of people think of augmented reality and virtual reality as kind of two ends of a spectrum, and I guess they are, but it's cool that it's the same skill set. Like, if you can do VR, you could do AR. If you could do AR, you could do VR, and kind of everything in between. So just a really interesting space to me. Anything about computers understanding the world that we live in and participating in the world that we live in is super interesting. I'm a big fan of like Tesla and cars learning to self-drive and all that stuff. So this whole area is very interesting to me.
Awesome. And at what point did you become interested in the looking glass? Is this something you just kind of found, or how did that happen, that connection?
I'm not sure. It was probably some kind of Kickstarter feed because, I'm always looking at gadgets and stuff in this space. Being able to see in 3D is really cool. But generally it requires some kind of headgear, whether it's the red blue glasses or an AR headset or a VR headset. And so being able to do 3D without having a headset or glasses on is really neat. I've been following Looking Glass for a couple of years, but to be completely honest, the displays, like, I struggled to figure out what I would do with the display to kind of justify the price point for me. And when the portrait came out at a nice, approachable, price point, and being able to see what people were doing with Blender, and and that I could put it in standalone mode on my mantle, like that was finally the point. I was like, yeah, it's time for me to pull the trigger and buy one of these.
What were some of the first experiments, things that you did with the Looking Glass?
I just started mainly playing around with the content that was out there, downloading the hologram drops and looking at those, playing with the HoloPlay Studio. Pretty early on, I started looking at the SDK because I enjoyed the ability to take static content or video content and put it on the device, but I really wanted to start playing around with what I could do in more real time. So I started, tinkering with different apps and tinkering with different ideas in Unity. And I know we have an audience potentially watching this video that may not have a big development background, but I think one of the really cool things that Looking Glass has done a great job with the Unity SDK. There's lots of things that you can accomplish in the Unity SDK with just drag and drop and playing around in the editor without writing a lot of code. You can bring in a 3D model, put it in the middle of the HoloPlay capture, and it shows up on your Looking Glass as a hologram that you can play around with. So really good job on that. And that it's been fun learning it.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I know that a lot of our team members are going to be stoked to hear that. Tell us a little bit now about what you've built, because we have this amazing new opportunity to play games, in the Looking Glass. And I think me personally, I think that's one of the things that gets me most excited about Looking Glass is just all the interactive content that's possible. Like, how did you get started with that? And maybe just describe a little bit about what it is.
Sure. Well, so it's actually kind of two projects. The first one I called ReGlass. And so, like I said, the first thing I was doing with the portrait was just downloading these hologram drops. And they were either static images or they were moving videos. And, and you could play them on a loop, but it was always the same thing. And I was like, how can we rapidly increase the amount of content that we can view holographically with depth? And of course, I'm a gamer. So I was thinking, how can we do this as games? And it's really nice that HoloPlay Studio lets you bring in, if you can come up with a photo and a depth map, you've got a hologram. So I started thinking, what would it be possible to just do this for a lot of video games? And I'd actually read an article by someone from Looking Glass that had, there was this virtual movable camera plugin that someone had written. And I think it had compatibility with like 30 or 50 games or something. And I thought that was pretty neat. But when I looked at that project, that the Looking Glass code had been removed. So I was really disappointed by that. And I thought, well, can we go beyond just this 30 games? Now, the original implementation of this was cool because you actually had the camera moving. So for those who are watching and don't know, when you have a real camera movement across multiple positions, then you get the best kind of holograms that you can, because you actually get reflections and you can see, the reflected light correctly. In the thing that I wrote, which is ReGlass, we don't have the ability to fully move a camera fluidly through space, but we do have the ability to get color and depth. So that's what I released. The first thing is I use this thing called Reshade, which has this wonderful big community. They have support for hundreds and hundreds of games. And I just wrote a Reshade plugin that displays color information and depth information side by side. And by having your color information and depth information side by side, you could take a screenshot, you could save a video, you could import that into HoloPlay Studio, and now you've got a hologram. And so that's really what I did. I was playing my favorite games, just grabbing screenshots, and now all of a sudden my hologram library grew very large, and it was content that I could dump, on the Looking Glass in a playlist and have it working in standalone mode. So released that a couple months ago. A lot of people got excited, and we're taking 3D screenshots of their games, and that's still very valid and usable in its own right. But then when I posted that, one of the community members, Jan, Eastco, I think is his name, if I remember correctly, reached out, and he's like, the way that you're doing this, I could maybe plug it into my Minecraft mod. So he and I started talking over Discord about, well, how would that work? How would what I wrote in ReGlass tie into his Minecraft mod? And he basically showed me how in real time he was kind of creating a depth object. Based on the depth map, he was creating a 3D object. I was like, well, I know Unity really well from my day job. Like, I could probably recreate that in Unity and kind of make this front end for doing it in real time. Today with ReGlass, you had to take a screenshot, then you had to load that in HoloPlay Studio, and that would give you a static image. So came up with this idea, like, if we could do this fast enough, if we could grab frames from the video game fast enough and make this 3D object fast enough and texture it fast enough, could we get to the point where you could actually play the video games in real time? And I did a quick proof of concept in Unity, and I was shocked at how quick I was able to actually update the screen. And so that's what became Refract. Like, Refract is literally just a server that if you can put color and depth information on the screen, it will dynamically make a hologram in real time that you can play on the Looking Glass. And we're able to, depending on your graphics card and your graphics settings, we're able to get down to, I'd say, probably around 50 milliseconds or so, which is super playable for many games. And so that's what it is. I mean, it's kind of a long-winded technical way of saying, let you play video games as holograms on your portrait.
That's awesome. And what are your favorite games that you played on it?
The ones that are in the video. So I've played Portal 2, Half-Life 2. I have played some Cyberpunk on there, played Halo on there. It's interesting that, if you're playing on the portrait, you're playing with about an 8-inch screen. 8-inch, is it 8 inches or 9 inches? I can't remember diagonally. And so you can run a modern game like Cyberpunk on there, but there's so much visual detail in Cyberpunk, especially if you've got ray tracing enabled, that it almost feels a little cluttered on the smaller screen. So I actually personally prefer the older games like Portal and Half-Life. I think look really great on the screen, and not a lot of visual noise, but it works with all the above. So it's really your personal preference.
Awesome. For game designers out there that might be watching that are interested in designing games, for use either in the Looking Glass portrait or general, just as holograms. You know, is there any advice that you'd give them?
Yeah. So, you know, if you come from a mixed reality or augmented reality or virtual reality background, the probably main difference I would say is that when you're doing traditional XR development, the user is the center of the world, right? So the user's head is the camera. As they move throughout the space, the camera moves with the user, and you have to design your game mechanic around the user moving. Whereas with Looking Glass, you have depth information, but you really have a center stage. So in the Unity SDK, there's this thing called the hollow play capture. It creates a volumetric, it's like a tall cube, you know, a cube that's taller than it is wide and deep. And that is anything that you put inside of that volume is what gets rendered as a hologram. So if you're looking to design a game specifically for the portrait or holographic display, you need to design something where the stage and the content is mainly kind of the middle of the world, right? So while you can play Doom or Portal or what have you on the Looking Glass and it looks great, I think you'll maybe have more user engagement, or we reach a broader audience if the content kind of stays within that center world and you can interact with it in that way. So that'd be my number one. Just thinking about the content as central rather than the user's head as central.
That's awesome. You know, it's really interesting. I think right now with a lot of the, I think just even screens and TVs that are coming out, you know, where companies are looking to go beyond, you know, news and entertainment as content, you know, now looking at different types of use cases from telemedicine, you know, displaying art, communications, et cetera. You know, what, you know, you working in a very technical capacity and having really kind of broken new ground as far as the use cases for a device such as the Looking Glass. You know, what's your hope and vision for futures of this technology? You know, thinking, you know, years ahead. You know, what's your vision?
I mean, I think we're kind of at a similar stage right now as maybe looking back in like 2007 with iPhone coming out. Like, I think there are certain things that we can predict are going to happen and things that we can't predict are going to happen. You know, I think a lot of people figured that, you know, you'd be doing email and managing contacts, maybe chatting, maybe sending photos. Like that was pretty predictable, but nobody predicted things like Uber, you know? And so that's where I'm super excited. There are a lot of things that we can look at today in mixed reality, and we can say these are obvious use cases. Training is a good one. Training someone to use, you know, or complete a task that may be dangerous, so you don't want them in the environment, or it's complex, you want to allow them to do it off the assembly line. Those are obvious use cases. But I'm super excited about the use cases that maybe we haven't thought about yet, or just haven't started to get to yet. You know, when we have a computer that really understands the environment that it's running in, you can start to do really interesting things. You know, as simple as like, you know, just being able to do measuring, like, you know, how much carpet do I need in this space, for example, is not a traditional problem that you would think of solving with a phone, but you should think of solving those kinds of problems with a device that understands the environment that it's operating in. And from a display technology standpoint, you know, I think it's what does it enable the users to do that they can't do on a flat screen? I mean, obviously see depth, be able to look around content, see it from multiple angles. I know like the molecular modeling is something that's being done today and is meaningful. But even like I was telling somebody the other day, I'm learning to fly a drone, and I have an RC simulator. And the main difference for me of doing the simulator in 2D versus doing it with the VR is that I hit trees less. And I hit trees less because I have depth perception, right? Without the depth perception, I don't know whether the drone or the plane is in front of the tree, behind the tree, or on the same plane as the tree. So having that depth information, those cues, I think are really valuable. And So I don't know, that's a long-winded way of saying I don't know what's coming, but some really cool stuff is coming that is very different than what's come before. And once people start to understand the tech and what it can do, I'm really excited for what they're going to build. Even something as simple as like, the way that the looking glass works, you have different cameras for different angles that you're doing it. So you can even use that display tech to kind of sub-segment a display. Like, you could almost imagine a scenario today when you're playing split screen multiplayer gaming, you could just look over and see what the other guy's doing. You can see where he's at. Could imagine using that kind of display tech to segment a display where I'm on the left side and I see my content, you're on the right side and you see your content, but we can't see each other. Just like even using technology like that in a way that wasn't thought of is interesting.
Definitely, definitely. And I think one thing that's really special about the XR space in general is that there's been such a strong, community aspect to how we're moving forward in a sense, right? You're a part of a Discord community of Looking Glass, enthusiasts. How do you feel, community is a big strength in just kind of the development of all of these new ideas?
This is such a big space, and it's still, I mean, in some regards, it's still in its infancy. It requires so, much thought and work to kind of get things to show up. And so I really, one of the things I really like about the community, and one of the things I really encourage about the community, is figure out where to draw the line between what is your true intellectual property and what can kind of help everyone out, right? Like, I figured out how to solve this particular thing. Okay, share it as much as you can. Share it. Like, if that's not the true intellectual property that's going to bring you dollars, then share the technique, right? Because so much of everybody like learning AR and VR and MR and really being able to build platforms and runtimes that do this easily is going to be that shared learning that we have together. Like having a 3D button and the way that the 3D button should be interacted with, that's an interaction model. What can we learn about that? What can we learn about, like, I'm going to geek off a little bit here in this thing called the mixed reality toolkit that Microsoft created. And when you think about a button, everybody knows what a button is. You have a button on your phone, you have a button on your screen. But what is that button like when you're trying to touch it with a hand, when it's a hologram and you're trying to touch it with hand tracking? Like, it's not a physical thing, so you can't tell when your finger has touched it. How do you know when you've pushed it enough for that button to click? And the MRTK team has put a lot of thought in just interaction models with the button. And that should be something that everybody can learn from. Like, whether you're building VR or AR, or even like I actually used that 3D button for the menu that I put on Refract, right? Like, that is knowledge that we can all share with each other. That's not intellectual property. So share as much as you can, learn from each other, be open, and just like, now's the time for us to really grow this platform and get people building cool things.
Are there any sort of last words of wisdom or recommendations that you would give to anybody out there? Maybe let's let a tip for those that are just starting out in the XR space, and maybe something for those that are veterans.
Don't be overwhelmed by the size of it. There are lots of different areas that you can get into in XR, from the commercial space and how it's used in commercial engineering all the way into, entertainment. And so I guess if I could give one piece of advice, it would be find the area that's of interest to you and kind of focus and go deep there. And don't get caught up and don't get worried about kind of making the wrong decision. I think there are lots of different tools in this space, and there are going to continue to be new tools. So, learn what's of interest to you, learn what people are using in your space, and just kind of be open-minded and follow as the space evolves, because the tooling, the libraries, the runtimes, all that stuff is going to continue to evolve significantly over the next couple of years. So just enjoy it. Find something you enjoy and just go along for the ride and learn along the way.
Awesome, super cool. And for those that have spent, a lot of time in this space, is there any perspectives you might share with them, about kind of building the future, of this space, and maybe looking to those that are just starting out.
Yeah, I mean, there are certain libraries and runtimes today. The majority of content out there for AR and VR headsets is probably written in Unity. So if you're looking to go deep, you can go deep in Unity, and there's a lot of stuff there. But I think, in my opinion, watching people build applications for mixed reality, AR and VR, like these apps take a lot to get off the ground. And so what I would encourage even the veterans in this space is, what can we be doing to lower the barrier of entry? What can we be doing to release software libraries and UI kits? Like, if you're doing desktop development, you've probably heard of ActiveX controls. You can bring in an ActiveX control or a control library for calendars and UI widgets, and that stuff's all missing today, in XR. So how do we build up these UI widgets and libraries and things that just lower the barrier of entry for folks? I think that's really where we need to invest to help this space grow more rapidly.
Thank you for your time, Jared. It's really, really cool to talk to you and hear about what you built. I'm super stoked to have you in the community, and thank you again for giving back to folks and sharing this awesome tool that you made.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the time, and for those watching this in the community, feel free to hit me up if you've got questions about getting started with the Unity SDK, or how it's different developing for AR headsets versus displays. Anything I can be of assistance. My username is eccentric in the community. So hope to see y'all out there.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jared.